Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's finally January 1st as I'm filming this, and it's time for me to talk about the best books for me in 2023. And I did not realize that kind of rhymed. So I'm not going to go in any particular order. I'm just going to pull them up as I see them here in the pile. So first, we have, and there's at least one book on this list. The last book I read that, or at least, that's on my Kindle, so I don't have a copy of it, a physical copy. And then one that I decided to donate. It's already gone, so I can't show you guys. And of course, you guys know I still do not know how to show digital pictures on the screen. So first we have, I finally finished it. Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight Archives. And I love this book. First, I'm not gonna give you guys a summary because I had already filmed this and I got interrupted, so I don't want to spend all day filming, so I'm not going to give you a summary of each of the books because I have like 18 books to talk about, so I'm just going to talk about my feelings. This was so good. Once again, we have this really complex magic system that Brandon Sanderson has created that has to do with weather and harnessing the energy of the lightning in the sky. You have this interesting setting, this kingdom that was destroyed, but resulting in these shattered plains. And so the king's army, when he wants to, fight, he's fighting against the Parshendi, who killed his father, who had assassinated his father. So you have our main character, Kaladin, who is a soldier, and he is enslaved, and he joins this group of slaves who basically carry these huge bridges across the Shattered Plains so that the king's army can cross safely and not fall into the chasms. And despite his depression and his struggles of facing and feeling in this place of emptiness, he somehow is able to get the bridge to work together and be a team. And he ends up being chosen by the gods of this world. And this first book is Kaladin's story, but we also have Dalinar's story. He is the king's brother, and before his brother was assassinated by a Parshendi, he had tried to get him into this book that he discovered, The Way of Kings, which has a more peaceful approach to things. And he tries to get him to, and when his brother dies, the king, Dalinar starts reading the book himself, and it ends up influencing his actions and his questioning things. And it's really shocking because he was a warrior, and it starts making people not trust him because things have been this way for years, and they don't understand why he would be like, no, we shouldn't be doing this. But like I said, it's more Kaladin's story, and I think in a later book we're going to explore Dalinar's story a little bit more and get to know him and learn more about his past. But you also have the character of Shallan, who I feel like I relate to her a lot, and she was someone who was trying to save her family by stealing this relic from the king's daughter, or his sister, and she apprentices to her under these false pretenses, and she starts seeing things that appear in her drawings that makes her a little suspicious and trying to understand them. And And she eventually ends up protecting the young princess from an assassin. And she's just very trying to prove her worth. And she's an academic person. She's very interested in learning things and understanding things. And I just, and it's just, it was such a good, fun adventure. And like, Brandon Sanderson just creates these complex worlds and these complex stories that it's hard for me to explain what they're about. But I'm so glad I finally read. I do have the first 4 books, so I can read the next one. So there is The Way of Kings, and then we have Ruin of Kings by Jenna Lyons. This one, I don't have all the books of this series yet. I did make sure I got book 2, but as soon as I finished this first book, I know a lot of people that didn't like this book. One of their criticisms was the structure of the book, because you have our main character Kieran telling his story to someone, but then you have the person who is holding him captive telling his story, but from a different perspective, in a different time in his life. And he's this young man who is the biological child of this really bad family, these horrible people, and he's trying to stay good, and he ends up realizing the government is in danger of his family taking over, and that's not good. And he goes on a quest. It's his journey of self-discovery and finding answers, and understanding his biological family and his history, and how he ended up being abandoned by them. And there's a really cool dragon that's so creepy and sinister, but kind of cool at the same time. There's a lot of intriguing, interesting characters, and I'm sure once again the author will build on those characters. I like Kieran as the main character. He's complex. He makes emotional, irrational decisions sometimes, and so he's very relatable. And he's just, like I said, he's someone trying to be good, surrounded by a family of horrible people. Like, there's only one person in his family who is genuinely a good person. That's his little brother, the person who he realizes is his little brother. And it was so good. It's been so long that, because it was like during the March or April when I read it, but I had a really, actually I might have read this in February. But I had a really good time with this, just as I had a really good time with The Way of Kings. And then we have this one. This is the second book in a trilogy. The first book is The Bladed Faith. This is the Vagrant God series. It kind of deals with this series, like the second one, to me, I couldn't decide between if I wanted to talk about the second book or the first book as a favorite. I mean, maybe I should have chosen the first book to talk about, because it's hard for me to talk about this book because I don't know if you guys have read The Bladed Faith. But it really deals with it's a unique approach to colonization, and how, like, these people of this kingdom are the people that took them over are, they're the bad guys, but then our main character, the young prince, Cyrus, realizes things are a lot more complicated. Maybe his parents aren't so innocent. And it kind of has a Zorro type storyline where the young prince becomes this secret person wearing a mask, this vagrant prince, and he's in danger of that mask taking over his life. He has dual identities. It deals with gods, and one of the characters, he joins a rebellion, and one of the members in the rebellion is, she can communicate and connect to the gods. So she has the god's voice in her head along with her own voice, and the god is very violent in telling her, go kill, and all that, and she's not sure she wants to do that. She's not sure if that's the answer. And what I like is that the second one really deals with Cyrus realizing that people are complicated, and that there's no right and wrong, and sometimes people make decisions to protect what's theirs, and it isn't always a morally good decision, and it's like, is this the right thing to do? Is it worth it? Kind of mentality. And it explores that a lot more in book 2, and it also explores the dual identity in book 2. There's a little bit of romance. There's including like, and there's also queer representation in this book. And I also like that he, we are introduced to his tutor, Cyrus's tutor, who he sees as an academic, his teacher, but then you realize as the story progresses, he's not necessarily he's not just an academic. And he learns that what is beyond, he gets a little, and we get a glimpse of beyond this world, and beyond this kingdom. And we find out how we find that things are very complicated and not that simple black and white mentality, and that no one is, and that when it comes to colonization, like in conquering nations, that it's not one of those, it's a messy situation, and and you might be on the side of the good guy, or who the people who you think are the good guys, and really they're not the good guys to the persons they took over, the kingdoms that they took over. And it's a really interesting look at that, and it puts our main character Prince Cyrus in a very complicated position. And it explores a lot more of that in the second book. There's one more book that I'm looking forward to reading. I don't know when that's going to come out, but I might not read it this year, because even if it comes out this year, because it might come out in hardback first, and then so I might want to wait. I'll probably wait until it comes out in paperback. But anyway, I really enjoyed that. And then we have, so I'm obviously starting with all the fantasy books I read first. So then we have The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington, who his new series, the first book in his new series, just came out, The Will of the Many. And apparently won the approval of Daniel Green. But this first book was really great. We have a school setting and characters realizing something about their magic that they didn't understand. You have our main character who discovers he knows he's an augur, and that augurs are seen as dangerous and a threat, so he can't use his magic. And there's this test in the school he lives at that is going to reveal that, and he's afraid of how people react, so he doesn't want to take the test. And then he discovers that things he might not have been told what the truth, and that things are not what they seem. And so he and one of his classmates, this young man, his friend, go on this quest to find answers and to find out what's really going on. And what little do they know is that their school is attacked, and their other friend, this young girl, is captured and held hostage. And then it turns out she comes in contact with these people who want her to be a spy for them, because because of the fact that when their school was attacked, she was made into a shadow. And I'm trying to remember what shadows Davian is the main character. It's so slowly coming back to me. And she was made into what is known as a shadow, and because of that, she is damned in a way, and she is scarred. But this group of rebels ask her to be a spy for them, but she's kind of she's being pushed and pulled in many different directions, and people want to use her for their own purposes, so she's not sure who she can trust and who's on her side. And meanwhile, Davian and their other friend, who turns out to have, like I said, to have a bit of a secret identity, are trying to figure out and understand what's going on, and I think they were trying to find this object, or maybe for Davian to learn more about his magic. I cannot remember. But there is a montage of scenes where he does start learning about his magic. And I think it's really cool how he learns that magic, because the guy who finds him to help teach him stops time, and he's kind of in this dimension where time freezes, and he can't leave this dimension. He's kind of trapped in this place, but it will give him time to learn his magic and understand it. Which is really cool. And I love how their friend, their female companion, is also plays an important role, and she gets to actually do something. She's not sitting there waiting around to be rescued. She actually gets to do stuff and play a role in this. And she gets to fight back. Like, she's doing a very important thing about being a spy, which puts her life in constant danger. But she feels like she has a purpose and that she's doing something. And I really like that. And I also like the little secret of his friend being revealed, and to the reader, and finding out that. And Davian, I think he does eventually find out, but not until later. I thought that was really cool, that whole mystery thing. In fact, it's one of my favorite tropes. The magic is really intriguing. I definitely want to know more about it. I haven't started the second book. I meant to this year, but I haven't picked it up. So, or I should say I meant to in 2023, because now it is officially 2024. So I will pick it up this year. But I had a really good time with this one. I might even like this one better than the Chorus of Dragons. Well, I don't know. Maybe not. I have to think about that. Okay, so I think that's all the... Is that all the fantasy? Yeah, that's all the fantasy I read this year. The rest is nonfiction and, drama. That's not fantasy related. Next we have... This one I read in the spring. I have 2 books in this list that I think are perfect for spring reads. Anne of Green Gables by M.L. Montgomery. I finally read this book. So I wasn't sure how I'd feel about this book, because I'm not the target audience, so I wasn't sure if I could get into it, because it's more middle grade in the writing, in the target audience. But this was so sweet and great, and just, I ate it up. It was so cozy and comforting. I love Anne as a main character. She's so imaginative and so sweet. And she's just, sometimes her imagination gets in the way, and she gets distracted easily and doesn't always pay attention. And I can relate to the idea of drifting off into your own mind. I love how when she gets to Avonlea, she comes up with different names because she doesn't like the names and finds them boring, and comes up with more magical, whimsical names. I like how she slowly wins people over, like Matthew Marilla, who took her in. Even though they wanted a boy, she proved herself because she, was in an orphanage. And so what kid would not want to escape an orphanage and want to improve and out of fear, be determined to prove their worth to the people who took you in. It's so, I do not blame her for being adamant to prove herself. And I love her relationship. Her relationship with Matthew Marilla is so endearing and sweet, and she just wins over Matthew immediately, while Marilla takes a little more time to win her over. And then you have her relationship with Diana. I love how important this friendship is. It just proves how lonely she was, and how she just wanted companionship, and how she even, and she just wanted a friend, someone to talk to, someone to share her dreams and her secrets with. And she found that in Diana, so her friendship with Diana becomes very important to her. And she is just so adorably dramatic about everything. And I like her, I have seen the adaptations, the original one that came out in the 80s or early 90s. And I always forget when it came out. And then there was also the most recent mini-series that came out that was sadly only made to 3 seasons. Which at least they ended the main relationship that everyone was rooting for. They resolved it by the end. When the show got canceled, they realized, okay, we need to make this relationship, want this to end on a good, positive note. But her relationship with Gilbert is so funny. She just cannot stand him. She broke her chalkboard on his head. She screamed and she pitched a fit when he kept calling her carrots. calling her Carrots because of her orangish red hair, and which, I love how, we really look at. And it's so sad how she's so insecure about her looks. I mean, I think that's very relatable. People, especially girls, worrying about what they look like constantly and being easily bothered if you tease them about their looks, even if you don't mean it in a mean way. And that showed that her reaction to Gilbert. She has very strong visceral reactions when people are say insensitive things to her. And she is a very complicated but very endearing character. And it's just her daily life in this place and going to school and living her life, and she just stays positive and strong and confident. The newest adaptation really builds on that and explores aspects of that and what maybe she went through and why she's the way she is. We get more of that in the series adaptation. But yeah, this was so heartwarming. It's funny. Like, I love when she accidentally put the laudlin in the cake, and it's so sad that she's so devastated that she messed it up. And, every time she messes up, she just feels so terrible about it, and of course, Marilla, she's just over dramatic about everything, but I want to give her a hug, and she's my new favorite character, and I could just gush about this book. I am so glad I decided to get over my, issues with not knowing if I'm going to love middle grade, because I love this book. I mean, I definitely think I probably need to be in the mood for middle grade because the writing is so much more simpler, and it's and like I said, this is very day-to-day life of this young girl, and not a lot is happening. But I hope that my niece gets into this one along with another book I'm going to talk about on this list of 18 books. But I love this. I definitely recommend it if you love cozy coming of age stories. Next we have another coming of age, but a little more tragic and darker of a story, a little more heavier of a story, including the book itself, is The Physician by Noah Gordon, which it is part of a series, but I think it's one where you can read the books as standalones. Like, the rest of the books are like his kids, and his grandkid, the main character's kids and grandkids. So we have Rob Cole. He is this young boy with a lot of siblings during the medieval period, I think, and his parents die of the Black Plague. And so he and his siblings, before his parents died, they apprentice them. They apprentice each of his siblings, and he gets apprenticed to this barber surgeon, who basically a traveling salesman type who has all these different supposed ailments and cures for different sicknesses. And so Rob develops, learns the trade and becomes actually really good. He forms kind of a bond with the barber surgeon, who tries to teach him and guide him. And it turns out that Rob has a special skill. When he touches people, he can see if they're sick, if they're gonna die. But he's warned by his mentor not to reveal that, and to continue to be apprentice to him. But as Rob's skills develop in his time with the barber surgeon, he decides he actually wants to be a true surgeon. Or true physician. And he ends up proving that he has good skills and he's a good learner. And eventually the barber surgeon passes away, and he learns that the best medical school is in Persia, but he isn't allowed to go to that school because he's Christian and they don't like Christians there. So, because he's determined to be a physician and it's important to him, he decides to sacrifice his Christian religion and become Jewish so he can get into the school. And he makes the journey to Persia. And it's, the first part of the book is his time as the apprentice to the barber surgeon. Then we have the middle of the book is his journey to Persia. And then the last section is all about his time in Persia, making friends, learning about the Muslim religion, going to school, learning to be a true physician. Like I said, it's a coming of age story. So many intriguing characters. You know, I like the barber surgeon. He's really funny and entertaining. Um, I really like learning about the Muslim religion, learning more about it. I did learn a little bit about it when I took an art history class. That I would mostly fall asleep because it was early in the morning. I like the two women in his life. You know, well, mostly the first girl he meets, who comes back into his life later in the story. Um, and it's such a great story. It does really get into, you know, the medical profession, um, really dive deep into it and the history of it. And there's sometimes some graphic details about that aren't always pleasant to to, to read about, you know, because it can be a little icky. Um, because it really dives deep into that. So I think if you like reading fiction and you are in the medical field, you might find this really fascinating to read. That's why I want my mom to read, because she is a nurse, a recovery room nurse, and I would love for her to read this. But it's a long book, and she doesn't read a lot, so I don't know if she will ever get around to reading this. I mean, I was looking in their cabinet they have in the room of books. They have like a small selection of books in there, like either books I gave them or books that from our friends gave them, and I don't know if they've read any of them. My dad might be more prone to read it. But my mom, like I said, she's used to reading like magazines and looking at her iPad on the internet, so and watching TV shows and stuff, so she doesn't. So sadly, I don't know if she'll ever get around to this, but I really want her to, and she did show interest in it briefly. You know, she tried. But yeah, this was really good, and it's also really cool to explore this part of the religion. I don't read. I admit I don't always read books about this part of the world, but I'm definitely trying to change that. But that was really good. And then we have another one that is a triumph, and I'm proud to say I read it. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, although it's actually Lev Tolstoy. This is so good. I'm so glad I read it. You have two storylines, and looking at these two lives that run parallel to each other, and it's looking at their choices and how, like, you know, who makes the right, you know, and how it affects their life. Like, Anna ends up having an affair, and but she has to sacrifice a lot, and she ends up, even though she's allowed to be with her lover, and things don't turn out as ideal as she would have liked being with her lover, even though her husband's not that great of a guy to begin with, and he was kind of a stick in the mud. She didn't necessarily make the best choice. But the problem is, as a woman back in this time period, she probably did not have choice in who she married. Or have not much of a choice. And then you have Levin, who is such a sweet being. I love that he's passionate about farming, although there are parts in the chapter that are all about agriculture that can be kind of boring. And also, you know, he gets into politics, which that could potentially be debatable. That one could be boring. That part could be boring too. But yeah, this is one of those bittersweet stories where there's some tragedy. There's a lot of tragedy, but there are a lot of sweet moments. Levin is in love with Kitty, but she doesn't necessarily feel the same way. Like, she rejects him when he proposes to her. And, you know, the man that she's in love with is Vronsky, Anna's lover, and she ends up having to do some soul searching while Levin is trying to get over her. But then she's starting to realize that maybe she could love Levin. So that part of their story goes in a more positive direction, while Anna's goes in a more negative direction, and it's very heartbreaking, but it's still also, there's a lot of happy moments too, and like I said, there is a lot of farming talk and agriculture, you know, and politics talk, but it's still so great, and I definitely recommend it. I mean, it's worth all the pages, I think. And then, oh my god, I absolutely love this book. It was so good. The Weight of Ink by Rachel Kadish. This is so good. It has, you know, I think if you're interested in literature that's about academics, this is a great, read about academics. You have this woman, Helen Watt. She's a professor, and she's elderly, and she has, um, again, I was eating I should have figured that out while I was having to take a break from filming. But I don't remember what it was. It's that disorder where you have tremors, you cannot control that. And she has that, in her boss, Lydian, tries to convince her maybe she should retire, but she's determined to continue on and keep going for as long as possible. And she ends up getting contacted by a former student who tells her his new wife, had inherited this house, and they discovered a mysterious Jewish manuscript in their home, and she decides to check it out. But unfortunately, she is a Catholic, and she also needs an assistant to help her go through the document because of her tremors. And she ends up hiring this young Jewish American young man who is a college student, to be her TA. And they don't like each other at first. They have a very antagonistic relationship. No respect. He's kind of arrogant, wants to prove himself, and she's very stubborn and is trying to last as long as she can before she has to retire for good. And we also get a flash of the story that takes place in the past, or during the right before the plague. You have this Jewish girl, and her brother were taken by a rabbi in England. And it turns out, she finds out that her brother gets killed, and she ends up taking his place as the scribe for the rabbi. And she ends up falling in love with being a scribe, and she actually really wants to learn more about religion, about her religion, and just wants to keep reading books. But she is a girl, and she is told that she has to get married. She can no longer be learned. And the guy who wants to marry her actually doesn't seem like necessarily a bad guy. She expects that he will want her to quit learning when they get married, and she refuses to do that because she cares about this. She's very passionate about this. And on top of that, she and her new friend, this rich girl who's also Jewish, are mocked and made fun of by some of the other non-Jewish, are seen as bad and evil and lazy and money grubbing, and there's one character in particular who's incredibly mean to them and horrible, and I wanted to punch him in the face. But it's so, and just we see both these two stories parallel each other, and they are connected, obviously, but it's just so good, and there's something just about the writing style that's really comforting and enjoyable to read. It's hard for me to explain, but there's just something about this writing style, and I find it in other books too. In fact, I kind of find it oftentimes in historical books, historical fiction type literature. But it's so good, and so I love that it explores a time period in Jewish history that you don't hear a lot about. You hear about what happened to the Jews during the biblical times, having to leave. They escaped Egypt, and Moses leading them to the Promised Land, and also learning about World War II and getting getting put into concentration camps or murdered in the gas chambers. You see books about those parts in their history all the time, but you don't really get it as much the other aspects, the other times in history with the Jewish community, the Jewish religion. And this explores a time in history that you don't read about. And I just absolutely love this book, and I want more people to read it. I think it's so great. Such a page turner. Okay. And then we have one that I read more recently, and that is Anglo-Saxon Attitudes by Angus Wilson. So I had never heard about this classic before, so I was very excited when I got it because it seems so interesting. you had this professor, Gerald Middleton, who, when he was a young man, he was part of this expedition where they discovered the grave of a bishop that held this relic that goes against religion, and it's more, the relic has to do with paganism. But Gerald has reason to suspect that one of his colleagues, another professor, might have faked it for a joke. So he feels incredibly guilty. So years later, as he's now old and he's trying to, and his colleagues want him to be the editor of the history paper, magazine, or whatever, and he's not sure, and he decides he's going to use this time to see if he can prove that this thing was a fake or not. And meanwhile, he is dealing with issues with his family. So that is kind of what part of the story, but that becomes kind of background, that plot, because the book focuses more on his relationship with his family and his co-workers. And you find out his wife, Inge, who's a very emotional person and very clingy with her oldest son. She is Scandinavian, while Gerald is English. And so he's very judgmental of her, and she's seen as very un-English in his mind. So he's very critical of her. But she's also, like I said, a very emotional person. She clings to her children. She coddles them constantly. And you find out that she has not seen her eldest son, who was her favorite child, for a long time. His friends take him away from her. His son he's also gay, and his dad didn't even know that. He doesn't respect, the son doesn't respect his parents. But because his mom coddles him, he's more willing to stay loyal to her, while, unlike his dad, who is a little bit judgmental of him. And then you have their two other children. One son who is a lot like his father and is following the same footsteps of their father, not in profession, but the fact that the father had an affair, and Gerald had an affair, and Inge finds out about it, but because she's someone who really cares about image, she sweeps it under the rug and tries to let her husband's lover kind of be part of their lives in a way, but not to tell her kids, not to traumatize the children. And the three children do not respect their father, even less than their mom. Their mom they kind of tolerate, and they baby her a little bit more, and she gets away with it. But Gerald, of course, is very, like I said, he's very judgmental. And the whole book is kind of about what is English and what was considered English and what is un-English. And the Anglo-Saxon attitudes, if you know your history, the Anglo-Saxons took over took over the territory from the Vikings. And it's funny, I'm actually reading the Saxon series by Bernard Cornwell, which kind of, which is the history behind that in a fictionalized way. And it's such an interesting, engaging story. And I also love, like I said, it's another academic type story where you're looking at, you're learning about certain, the history, and you're doing research, and you're with the character, and it's just such a, that those parts are really, in my head, for me, they are really fun. I mean, maybe that's the nerd in me, but it's fun seeing these characters discuss these things and doing the research and trying to find answers, going through these manuscripts. I mean, it might be boring for other people, for other readers, but for me, like I said, it is really fun to, watch them read about that kind of stuff. Okay, then we have The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I just love this book. Oh my god, it's so great. And what I really appreciate, and like I said, I could be wrong. I don't have any proof, but I personally think the main character is autistic. So this is about Prince Mishkin, this young man who he has been in a sanitarium because he has seizures, and he has decided to come out into the city and just interact with the people. He wants to be part of the world again, and he is so kind. He has a strong, faithful beliefs, religious beliefs. He's very faithful, believes in God, and he's such a good person. So he does good in everybody. But the problem is when he interacts with these people, he's very naive and sees the good in everybody, even though there probably might not be as much good as he thinks. And he's just a kind soul, and he really knows about certain subjects. Like I said, there's a lot of things about him that make me think he would be put on the spectrum. And he ends up getting caught in the middle between these people who are just so fascinated with him, but at the same time they think he's an idiot. And they just don't understand him, and he doesn't understand them either. And he ends up finding himself caught between two women who have fallen in love with him. But at the same time, these two women just don't get him. And there's this push and pull. And oh my god, I just love Mishkin. I feel so bad for him at the same time. He's such a pure, good soul, and so sweet, and just, and yes, he has a very strong belief system to the point of he might seem like he's pushing his beliefs on you. But I mean, I'm Christian, so maybe that's why it doesn't bother me. And the whole time I was reading this book, I just kept being like, he's not an idiot. He's autistic. I mean, like I said, I could be wrong. Of course, back then they would not, when Dostoevsky wrote this, he would not know what autism is probably. I mean, he might have interacted with people that are like Mishkin, but he wouldn't know if they were autistic or not. But I just kept getting so angry at the other characters. I mean, sometimes I like them and I feel bad for them, but other times I just wanted to smack them. They were just so frustrating because they were so mean to Mishkin. And he's just he's just a sweetie pie. And there's one scene in particular that has nothing to do with Mishkin, but it's in the beginning of the book with one of the characters, one of the patriarchs or one of the families is on the train coming home. He wants to smoke his cigar on the train, but he's told that he can't. And this woman is sitting across from him, and I think she might have been the one who told him he shouldn't be smoking that. And she's sitting across from him with her little small dog on her lap, and the dog is barking away. And I understand. As much as I love dogs, I get that. That kind of barking, especially of small dogs, can get annoying. But it does not justify someone taking the dog by the scruff and throwing it out the window because you were told by this woman that, oh, you can't smoke that. It's like, I get an annoying dog, an annoying woman, but who cares about your stupid cigarette? You can live without that for for like 30 minutes or an hour. You will survive. Or go somewhere else. You just have to sit there and be lazy and be an ass and throw the dog out the window. That is a living, breathing creature who is this woman's best friend, who loves her unconditionally, who gives her comfort and is sweet and did not do anything to you except for maybe annoy you a little bit, and you decide to throw it at the window. You're murdered that dog. I don't care if it's not a human. It is a living, breathing creature. And that part pissed me off. And I'm sure any dog lover would agree with me. And it's just that I just could not stand that part. But other than that, I absolutely love this book. Like I said, I got really frustrated and emotionally involved in the story. I mean, again, I don't cry in books, and I didn't cry in this, but I still got very emotionally involved and very angry with how Mishkin was treated. But I love this. And then we have The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Now, I've only seen an adaptation of this, the one with Maggie Smith as Miss Medlock, which she did a brilliant job. In fact, that's the only thing that was disappointing was Miss Medlock was not as intimidating and scary in this book. I mean, maybe she would be if I was reading this as a kid, but I think Maggie Smith did so much, really did a good job of making her intimidating and antagonistic to Mary. But we have our main character, Mary Lennox. She lived in India. She's very rich. But her parents get killed after India gets attacked. And she is forced to live with her uncle, Uncle Craven, who lives on the English moors. And he has a son that's Mary's age, Colin, but Colin stays in isolation in his room, so she doesn't meet Colin right away. And she is kind of forced to kind of take care of herself by, Miss Medlock is like, I'm too busy to be responsible for you. And her only companion is Martha, one of the maids, who is kind of her main maid. And so Martha tells her about her uncle and that his wife, her mom's sister, had died. Mary's mom's sister had died years ago, and he's still grieving the loss. He doesn't even interact with the son, and his wife had a garden that is kept locked up. So Mary decides she wants to find this garden. So she starts exploring the grounds and finds the garden and finds the key and decides to bring the garden back to life with the help of Martha's brother Dickon, this boy who's really good with animals. And eventually she meets Colin and proves to Colin that he is not in danger of dying, and he just needs to get up and walk around and try to, fix himself and not to believe what people tell him about himself. And he helps Mary and Dickon bring the garden back to life. And it's so good and so heartwarming. I love the descriptions of the garden. I love Mary's relationship with the robin and Ben's relationship with the robin as well. And I think the robin was based on a real life robin that the author Frances Hodgson Burnett had found and befriended. And it's just such a good story, a great spring read. It's heartwarming and it's fun, and yeah, Mary, I do love how bratty Mary and Colin were. Like, they weren't perfect kids. Like, sometimes authors will make kids very angelic, and like Dickens, as much as I love Dickens, his two books that were in the main character was a child. The child was very angelic and pure and perfect and didn't do anything wrong, was always good all the time. Or when they did something bad, they were like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that, and they immediately regret it and try to fix it. The ones that are a lot more complex are the ones that grow up throughout the story, like David Copperfield and Pip. Those are the ones that get more complex and interesting and less angelic. But the two stories, Oliver Twist and The Old Curiosity Shop, the kids are just so perfect and angelic, and while in this one, Anne of Green Gables, the kids are not perfect. They're not angelic. Like, Anne is very sweet and kind and caring, but she makes mistakes and gets lost in her own head. While Mary and Colin are brats. They're like such spoiled children that are used to being pampered and babysat, and just like, so I love that. I like how they're brats, basically. I love that story. I love that. Now, Dickon is a good, kind person. But he makes mistakes. He's not perfect. But yeah, I love this. This is so good. I'm so glad I read it. And I think mostly the adaptation I saw did stick to the book, because it's a very simple story. Not a lot is going on in the story. It's just Mary's living in her uncle's house and interacting with everybody and discovering the garden and everything. So it's not very complicated. And I think it was very easily can be adapted in a way that's pretty close to the book. There were some things they did, like they took out certain characters, they combined certain characters, and like I said, the only disappointing aspect was that Miss Medlock was not that intimidating or scary as she was, and not as antagonistic. In fact, she doesn't really even care what Mary does. Like in the movie adaptation with Maggie Smith, she cares that Mary's interfering with Colin, and she does not like Mary. But this, like I said, was so good. I definitely, again, another book that I'm hoping my niece will get into. Okay. Okay, so, well, let me first, before I talk about these last 3 books, let me talk about the ones that I don't have a physical copy of. First, we have The Burning God, which is the 3rd book in the Poppy War. That was so good, so action-packed, everything just comes together and explodes, and, like, you see more of the main character, Rin, and how she's falling apart and struggling with, right and wrong, and how she sees herself as in the right, but it's not a peaceful route, and, she is tempted to do something that could be consequences for this whole nation, and she's willing to do whatever it takes, even mess with the gods, which can be dangerous for her. And it's like, in her relationship with the two guys is kind of diverging, and it's neither of those guys really trust her 100%, and it's just such a great explosive ending to that trilogy. And I love that Rin is a terrible human being at times, and I love how messed up of a character she is, and how she's so messy and complicated, and I love that. I like that she's not a perfect character. I love her character. And I think it was a great ending to that trilogy. And I will read some more from Rebecca Kwan. I do have her book Babel. I do want to read Yellowface at one point. And I think she has one more book that just came out. But anyway, so then the other book, the last book I read in 2023 that I finished, because I continued reading up until today, is Psycho by Robert Bloch. Yes, Psycho, that is the book that the movie is based off of. And this, I am so glad I read this. This was really good. It's very dark. I don't think every woman would love to be in Norman Bates' head. He is very hateful in his mind, and very judgmental of women, and which I think is, he is very influenced by his mother, which we get little bits and pieces of his relationship with his mother. And there is a TV show spinoff, prequel show all about Norman and his mom when he was growing up. There's a show that explores that. And I want to say it's on AMC, called The Bates Motel, and explores that relationship. So I would love, if I can get access to that show, I would love to watch it. But like, it's very like, Norman is probably the most interesting character in the whole story. I did like Lila. I definitely was on her side about how to deal with the situation of her sister going missing and how she might not be alive, because her sister's boyfriend Sam and the detective that her boss hired just are like, sit here and wait, let the men take care of it. And Lila's just sitting there knowing that her sister is missing and could be in danger, and just knowing her sister as well as she does, and loving her sister more than anything. She wants to take action. She cannot just sit there, and I totally agree. I would want to take action too. I wouldn't want to just sit there. Like, if something happened to my sister, I would feel the need to do something. Now, I don't think my brother-in-law would just sit there and be like, wait patiently. I think he would also want to do something too. Thankfully, we will never find out of them being in the crisis like that. And just, I love how the story builds up suspense and builds up this complicated, creepy relationship between Norman and his mother. And of course, because I'm familiar, even though I have never seen the movie all the way through, I know the twist of the story. But the way the author did it, I think, was really, really great, because you didn't really know for sure what was really going on, and it just builds and builds and just gets more complicated, and you're just finding yourself questioning things. and wondering, okay, what is true and what's really going on, and can we trust Norman? Are things what they seem kind of mentality. Robert Bloch also creates this great atmosphere. Like the two most important and the most intense scenes are filmed when it's raining, which I think adds to the atmosphere. And it's very tense. I love how it's kind of how it's psychological, and it deals with mama's boy and mother son relationships. I always have been fascinated by stories where there's a mama's boy in the story. And it was really exciting to read the book for the first time, and just in the ending, which, I mean, I knew what the ending was, but still, I was like, oh, it's still so unsettling, the ending. It's like, what's going to happen next? Kind of situation. And I do want to see the original adaptation. I know there's another adaptation with Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates, which that should be interesting. Like, I don't know how people feel about that one, though. I mean, it's inevitably going to be compared to the original movie with Anthony Perkins. But I still would like to give it a shot. If if I only have access to that one, then I will watch that one. But I'd be so curious. I mean, but it's so good and so page-turning. You just want to keep going, find out. Even though I know, like I said, I knew it was going to happen, I still was engaged and still want to know more. It was still unsettling. In fact, I kind of I had nightmares one of the nights after I read it, which, although ironically has nothing to do with that book, it actually has to do with It. My dream, the book, Stephen King's It. But yeah, it was so good. I'm glad I read. I'm really enjoying reading books, the books that are the popular horror classics are based off of. Like I also read, I guess I could have put this one on the list too. Rosemary's Baby. I also absolutely love that book too. I also read that on the Kindle as well. Again, it's so creepy and unsettling, and I love how it's dealing with the occult and devil worship. I find that really fascinating, wanting to, understand why, how people can get into that. What makes people get into that, and the terrifying idea that your child growing inside you was conceived via the devil is absolutely terrifying, because it's like, are you evil? Is your child's going to grow up evil? Can you stop that? Can you purify them and save them from becoming evil themselves? And that is absolutely terrifying. This story. And then she is constantly gaslit by her boyfriend in the book, telling her husband, telling her, and the fact that he chose to do this, get involved in this for his own gain, for his career, just pisses me off, because he sacrificed his wife and his future child for a career, when he could always get another career or just keep trying. And if it doesn't work out, then, like I said, he can get another career. He'll survive. I mean, I understand wanting to become famous and have people get passionate and crazy, but people getting that crazy over that is just, I think it was, like I said, that one was just as good. And like I said, I am really enjoying reading these horror stories that were movies, and are nowadays, I feel like they're more known for their movies than the original book. Okay, now let's talk about, I have 3 more books here, and they're all nonfiction. First, we have In Search of Mary Shelley, The Girl Who Wrote Frankenstein by Fiona Sampson. The only problem with this is that it was not long enough. But other than that, this was really good. We really get to know Mary Shelley and her relationships with her father, with Percy Shelley and Byron, and what inspired her to write Frankenstein, and her relationship with her half-sister, and how complicated those relationships were, and how devoted she was to Percy, even though he probably did not deserve it. And just her writing Frankenstein and, you know, becoming probably more successful than her husband. And it's like, I don't know, I did not know a lot about Mary Shelley until this book and until I started watching Jennifer Brooks' channel, who was a big fan of Mary Shelley and her husband Percy Shelley. I do feel like this book kind of ruined my interest in reading Percy Shelley's poems. But either way, it was really good, really great deep dive into who Mary Shelley was. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm glad I read it. And then we have, I actually participated in Jane Austen July, and or I participated for the second time in a row, knock wood. Then I remembered to participate again this year, and I read The Real Jane Austen, A Life in Small Things. This was really great. Like, I love that it explores who Jane Austen was in a very unique way. It looks at things that they actually use, the things that represent the family, like the carriages they would use, the articles of clothing they would wear, those little silhouette pictures that they would have up in their house or carry around with them. It talked about her writing desk, the military hats that her brother wore. Like, it really uses those as the focal point to learn the history of this woman, of Jane Austen, who she was, what she believed in, where she grew up. I think this was such a great, fun, deep dive into who Jane Austen was as a person. I really enjoyed it. I definitely, honestly, I would like to read more books that kind of I still like to read a traditional biography on her, but I think it's really cool to read these nonfiction works about her that have a unique focal point, that explore who she is in a very different way than the usual biographies. So I really enjoyed that. And then the last book I read, which I read actually in January, was We Don't Need Roads, the Making of Back to the Future trilogy. I absolutely love Back to the Future. It was the first sci-fi I ever got into. And it's all, and this really dives deep into the making of Back to the Future, told from an author who is a huge fan, which I feel like if you're gonna write a book about a movie franchise or a singer or an author or whoever, you gotta be a big fan of them or that thing. So he probably is even more of a fan than I am, and he really talks about the details of how difficult the movies were to make, certain instances and rumors about the making of the movie. Like, there were some things that I already knew about, but I didn't know all the details, so he really dives deep into that. And of course you get pictures, and which I'm guessing if there's a hardback version of this, they're probably colored, because I noticed that hardback books always have the color. Well, there's a color picture. Never mind, there are color pictures in this one. And we also get, like, we learn more about the first actor they had playing Marty McFly before Michael J. Fox, who was the person they wanted from the beginning. We learned about the whole Crispin Glover situation and how he wanted more money. We get both sides of that and how his fellow actors were not so keen on his replacement and how awkward it was for them, especially for the woman who, what is her name? I can't remember her name. I'm trying to find the name of the actress who plays the mom. Oh, here. Leah Thompson. Leah Thompson was definitely not necessarily as happy about the replacement for Crispin Glover. But it was such, if you're a fan of Back to the Future, I think this is a great book to read. Like I said, it really dives deep. And I definitely want to look at more behind the scenes videos and panels about Back to the Future, because I've never really watched them. And there have been a couple of the last few years at GalaxyCon, I think, some of the actors, or even at AwesomeCon, some of the actors involved, like Christopher Lloyd, have gone to conventions. And I'm like, damn, that's one of the people that I would have loved to meet and interact with. He was part of, like, Christopher Lloyd is part of my childhood. He was in a lot of the movies that I watched growing up, so, I wish I had been there, but safety first. But yeah, this was so great, like I said, for someone who's a fan. So it's really one of those, it's kind of, it's like some of the nonfiction, like all the nonfiction, it's more for, like, if you are really passionate and care about the subject matter. And this subject matter really is important to me. Okay, so those are my favorite books for 2023. If you have any favorites of books that you read in 2023, I would love to know what they are. And I really hope you guys are having a great start to 2024. And are excited for this new year and ready to read more books. Just, to build once again your reading resume. And if you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification below if you want to be notified about my latest videos. I hope you're enjoying, like I said, I hope you're enjoying your first day of the new year. And I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!